giving your time. And I suppose from my point of view, a lot of what I'm going to go through, you've been living and breathing over the last few weeks when you've been back up and running. So a lot of it you will know, a lot of it you'll be doing anyway within your clubs and within your groups. And hopefully out of tonight it might give you some reassurance, some confidence that what you have in place is best practice. And look, hopefully ultimately you might get one or two little extras that you can add into it. So I'll just go straight into it there. So if Eamon, if you're able to just share the first slide, and we can just talk through it. And any questions, just obviously feel free to throw it into the chat bar. But obviously my artistic part came out. Prefer kind of doing it a little bit this way, guys, so it might keep our attention. But I suppose when we were looking at organising the camps and getting them up and running, there was obviously a huge amount of things, no more than there still is, up in the air, and a lot of uncertainty. But my ultimate thing was that I was fairly confident we could deliver a really wanted program at that time to get kids back out and get them active, and to be able to deliver it in the safest manner possible. So I suppose our first priority was looking at the venues, and all the clubs obviously went through the various parts of getting their COVID compliancy stuff in order. That was obviously a must for the clubs to take part in the camps. I suppose on that, and little things I've seen throughout the course of the first couple of weeks that we've been back up and running, and probably things that make your lives a little bit easier as coaches or as juvenile coordinators, definitely is little things like hand sanitizers and having them at easy points where kids are walking onto pitches. So instead of having someone go around with a bottle, and that if it's there on the gate as they go in, or right at the point that they step onto the pitch and step off the pitch, and that's just definitely one thing I've noticed from the camps and from clubs that are back up and running currently with the juvenile sections. Just that having it there, it takes a little bit of work off you yourself, that once you know it's there at that point, the kids are walking by it on the way in and on the way out, and they're getting hands sanitized. The health check, I know some of you might be using apps, some of you might be using Microsoft Forms, some of you might be still using the paper one for people checking in, their pre-event health check. I suppose that was my biggest challenge after we got the 11 venues up and running. That was my biggest challenge in terms of chasing people for the pre-event health check. Ideally, if you can go paperless, it does save a lot of hassle. It also will allow you, with the pods of 15, it just allows you to have them all pre-done. So when a kid turns up, you know that you're sending Eamon to the green group and Emer to the red group, etc. So that it is quite important that pre-event health check is done, obviously pre the event, and not on the morning off. Ideally, you don't want to be there with the paper thing and then having 16 people where you have 15 already there in one pod. So I suppose there is multiple different apps that are out there, and as I said, I use Microsoft Forms, which was very good and very simple. You had everything there and access to it on your phone, if it even was on an hour or two before the event. Drop off is probably a little thing that's probably been forgotten about, or in some places it's gone a little bit slack. So mums and dads are kind of getting out of cars now and hanging around, and that's probably one of the points that's just one of the kind of things to keep an eye on, is that the kids are actually really good at getting out, getting on the pitch, sanitizing their hands, but it can be mum and dad that hang around, go over and start chatting to another mum and dad, and they're not sanitizing their hands, and they're staying in a group of whatever, 3 to 4 people. So again, I think if you reiterate your drop off and you have that in place in your car park, that it's just a one-way free flow system. If you have the volunteers on the morning, that they're just checking the kids in out of the car and letting them get out onto their pitch. Again, on that, like when they are being dropped off, if you do have that, like, Microsoft Word or Excel sheet or whatever sheet you have, just with the names, as long as you can have the names done pre and you have that 15, and okay, we have our 15 or 12 kids, whatever it is, that are going and they're in the under sixes and they're going to the green cones. So you have a set out area, and they're green, they're red, they're orange, whatever it is, and you have that all done pre. So it's just as soon as the kid gets out, you're just telling them you're going to the orange group, the red group. Um, the pods, I suppose, obviously we are restricted to a maximum of 15 kids. In a lot of respects, it probably is way more manageable to have that sort of number of kids, particularly in juvenile rugby. I suppose it does lead to a bit of a headache of maybe having to find, or you've had to go and find extra bodies and extra coaches to deal with your numbers. But I do think overall, even without COVID, that leads to a better experience for the kids because they are going to get more touches of the ball. Whereas some mornings you would have been traditionally, you could have been there on your own with 30 kids. So I definitely will be a fan of the pod system anyway, regardless of COVID or not. A session plan, like Conor will touch on some games. He'll touch on the Rugby for Children program, which is a brilliant tool and has some brilliant drills that you can do in it, brilliant games that you can do in it, even with the restrictions of no contact. I've been doing a couple of sessions in schools and lucky enough to get into schools that have been willing to allow us in. And we've had some brilliant sessions with the kids. We've kept it fun, we've kept it active, kind of high intensity, even though it's only been pass catch decision making literally that you can do, and just doing kind of fun relays and bits and pieces around it. Again, I think it goes back to that why there in the bottom corner. You're giving that outlet to the kids. It's challenging times for them as well, and in classrooms. Some schools obviously have different policies where some kids are camped in the classroom for a day. They have to wear a mask. They're not allowed, in some cases, not allowed much access to outdoor activity. So again, I think it's hugely important that we do try and keep rugby going in as safe a manner as possible, and adhering to the current IRFU guidelines. And for me as well, personally, it's just been brilliant to get back out and get a break from everything, and get out with the kids and have some fun when you're out there, and escape from everything that's going around. It's just been fantastic from my point of view to get back out there and doing that. So the session plans, so that's all there in the Rugby for Children. I'm sure as juvenile coordinators, you would have seen all this before, and I'm sure you're bouncing that out and sharing it with your coaches. But it's definitely go into the session or your Saturday morning with a session plan, so you know exactly what you're doing, what your role is on the day. So am I a coach? Am I a COVID officer? What exactly am I doing? So for instance, if you were in a position where you had your under 8 group, that one person is identified as the COVID officer, or taking the names, checking the names, has the pods drawn up of who's in what pod, has a color coded, and then they're checking that person has their health check done. And if you had another 2 people that are coaches physically on the pitch, or another 3 people, that they know exactly what they're doing as well. A huge thing for me as well that I felt made it work really well for us was that I had basically took the role of compliance and organising, I suppose, all the logistics around it. So I was doing all the chasing of the pre-event health checks, and the coaches didn't have to worry about that. So the coaches just had to be there. I made sure I was there at least an hour early. I had all the pods set up in terms of, I just done color coded systems for the pods. If it was a little bit of a walk from the car park to the pitch, I just lay out. So for instance, if it was a red color code pod, that I just done a line of red cones from where the kid would meet and path, and they followed the red cones up, and likewise with white or blue or whatever it was, and that was quite straightforward and simple. But I definitely think in terms of, if you have that sort of volunteer power, that you do be in sync and you have the club set up as early as possible. So I know most clubs are set up in terms of hand sanitization, disinfectant spray, etc. for the equipment. Just for each session, you probably will need to lay out your cones. You will need to have your balls there. So I think the earlier you can get out, or if you can get out there 45 minutes beforehand and have it set up, and if that's your role done, then you're just observing and you're making sure that everyone's sticking to the guidelines when the kids arrive and the coaches are out on the pitch. And I think it just takes a little bit of a burden off then some of the coaches. And obviously you can look at rotating that role and share the responsibility over the course of the weeks and months. But why, as I've kind of gone into, again, it is that outlet, and I know Molly touched on it there, but for me, it's been just brilliant again to get back out and get coaching. And for me, it's even me having fun with the kids. I've been enjoying it, and I know the kids have as well. Um, Obviously, the last one there is just clean, clean, clean. So it is. Let's just stick to what we are being told. I know it can kind of, you can maybe feel, oh, if there's something, it'll be all right, or you forget about it. Or I know in some clubs then a lot of people are using the kind of pump spray, and the spray goes missing, the nozzle's gone missing, the head of the sprayer's gone missing. If you can, like what I got was a half blue barrel. It was filled with water and disinfectant. So ideally, it was kind of a Dettol disinfectant. Just something that I learned along the way as well. If it's if you're using a Milton type disinfectant, you need to be steeping stuff on that for, I think it's a period of 5 to 10 minutes for it to take place. Whereas a Dettol disinfectant is instantaneous. So that was quite handy and just interesting to learn about. If you're using tags or tag belts, the belts I was using, and I still do use a Dettol spray, which is in a can. So after a kid is finished with it, I spray it down. The tags themselves are dipped in the solution and wiped down. Likewise with the balls, they're dipped in the solution and wiped down. I suppose there's probably a lot of queries over the pods, particularly now more so than the summer. Obviously, it's around numbers in terms of where COVID's at the minute. It's around the kids are back in school. So you've kids arriving to you that are in multiple schools and coming from multiple different possible other sports that they're playing. So again, you're kind of asking questions. Well, if they're coming to us in a pod of 15, but they're mixing in with other kids in another school, etc., or another sport. I suppose the main thing is that it's the pods are trying to minimize the impact on your club, and the group of people that are there overall on that day. So, for instance, why I have Homer screaming and a little lad getting sick, and that's why the pods work was because we used to experience that twice on our camps, where we had a child on 2 separate occasions vomited. So it was a huge learning from that. I mean, the first time it happened, obviously, it was very early in our learning of this and dealing with it. It was obviously immediately very stressful, but it did show you how it works. So there was a pod there where it was 10 kids. The little lad had vomited. We obviously had to contact the parents. I think there might be 1 or 2 of them on the call tonight. They had to be, obviously they were sent home. And then in relation to the little lad who got sick, at that point in our learning of it and what procedure we had in place, the advice was that the mum obviously had to contact the GP, and in that case he was sent for a test, but that was obviously came back negative. And I suppose learnings around that, I did get to talk to someone in the HSA who had a little lad in that group, and I suppose it's just simple little things that you learn along the way. But a couple of good little tips maybe is that one is, particularly with vomiting, it's not a sign or a symptom of COVID, but at the same time, you do shut down that pod because of where we are at the current time. So you even though it was just a vomit, you still have to go through that procedure. So it is advising the parents to contact the GP, and then you're basing it on the GP's advice. So if the GP comes back and says, we don't feel the child has any symptoms or signs of COVID, we don't want to send them for a test or her for a test, that's what you're basing then the feedback that you're giving to the parents of the other kids that were in that pod. But even with a vomit and bits and pieces like that, now it is shut down the pod and send that pod home. But again, that was how and why the pod works in one respect, that we didn't have to send the whole camp home. Was it frustrating for us? Yes, I'm sure it was frustrating for the mums and dads because it was very, very early in the morning when it happened. So they've literally only been there. I only got there and got out onto the pitch. But yeah, I think it is just following that. So again, it was just that you're followed by that procedure, and then you're following what you do next in terms of the feedback to the parents based on what the GP's advice is, and you're going by that medical practitioner's advice. So yeah, so I suppose if there's any other questions you want on that, feel free to bounce a few bits in. Again, with the pods, and I know a lot of people throw me a question of, well, they're playing Gaelic and they're in school and they're mixing with different people that aren't necessarily coming to rugby, and then they're coming to rugby and mixing, etc. Again, it's to minimise the impact on your club. So if something occurs within that pod is isolated and sent home, and obviously the coaches and the parents within that pod then are waiting on the guidelines from the medical practitioner. So I suppose that's why I know people are questioning, as I said, well, they're playing Gaelic, etc., and then they're coming to rugby. So the main thing is that we follow the IRFU guidelines at the minute. We're still there to give the outlet to the kids. We're keeping it as safe as possible. And again, it minimises the impact, because if you, so for instance, one of the things will be that if you select your pot of 15 for argument's sake, if you 30 kids in one of your age groups, and you split them into two groups of 15, and you have a red group and a white group, the red group stays the red group for the next couple of weeks. They don't cross over into the white group, because obviously if something happened within that, and then you have all the traceability, etc., within that. So that would be my advice. The coaches stay the same within that group as well. So the coaches stay with the red group, etc., for them few weeks. And then again, that minimises the impact on the club as a whole, because if they cross over potentially on the one day, etc., whatever it is.
Ross, just on that, Ross, it's probably while you're on the point, question that ties to that. In the pods, is it 15 including the coach or 15 plus a coach? Lyndon may be part of this answer as well.
Yeah, I would have tried to kind of keep it to sort of a 15 max anyway. That would be kind of including the coach, but Lyndon might have more.
Yeah, it's 15 in total, so that's inclusive of the coaches. Yeah.
Perfect. And just as regards to the use of bibs, Ross, on the camps or in training in general, what would be the cleaning requirements of bibs, or have you any procedures around their use that would be, I suppose, reduce the risk, but also be easy on the coaches from a logistic perspective?
Yeah, we stayed away from bibs because it was obviously with the camp it was running day after day, so it would have meant that you technically you can use bibs, but you must wash them after the event. Obviously it brings little other challenges using bibs, because kids have a habit of taking them off, putting them down. So if you are giving out bibs or using bibs, one is that child holds on to that bib for the session. They don't take it off. If they take it off, it's put into a bag and it's not shared with anyone. For us, we stayed away from it because we were rolling day after day. It would have meant trying to get them washed and dried for the following day. So we just stayed with the tags. So obviously that allowed us to kind of separate them into two separate groups or teams, if you get me, within their pod. So then when they were playing, even if it was just passing games, etc., that there was no tag even involved with, it was just to identify them in two different colours. So technically for your Saturday morning, you could use some bibs, but it is a little bit of a headache just to make sure that they are washed properly, sort of on a 60-degree wash afterwards, and obviously dried for the following week, you know.
Yeah, so there's a few aspects. One of the answers there is coming in on the chat room is the hottest wash possible, or 60-degree wash for bibs if you're using them. If you have the facility, I know what we've looked at doing in some squads is using having reversible bibs, so you have two colors, but also let the child themselves have the bib, take it home. It's their bib for the season. They bring it back for each training session. And to deal with that aspect that way. Just one thing that struck me, Ross, as well, you mentioned about the parents congregating and mitigating against that. And I know from what we're learning at the moment, obviously the incidence of school kids actually getting the virus has slightly increased. But along with that, what they're recognizing is that transmission isn't happening in school. And their bigger risk is kind of parents at the school gate. And probably what struck me about the camps is the whole setup lent itself to parents not getting together. So would you like to delve into that a bit further, just as regards the pick up and drop off, and how procedural it was really?
Yeah, there was a lot of different discussions on pick up and drop off, because particularly within clubs, we're dealing with large numbers arriving on a Saturday morning. Even with the camp, like, we've limited it to 40 odd arriving. There's a lot of people saying, do we need to give them individual drop off times, etc. To be honest with you, it naturally happened that people arrived at different times. I suppose logistically it was okay. Have we access to cones for the car park to put in a simple one-way free flow system? Making sure we had enough staff so each pitch had, or each pod on the pitch, or each zone that we had marked out on the pitch had the coach waiting on the pitch with the gear. But then we tried to allow for sort of 3 to 4 staff then to be free to manage the car park, basically, so that you were able to deal with sort of 3 to 4 cars at any one time. Or if you had 2 of you checking the kids in and out of the cars directly, and then the other 2 were just ushering them towards the pitches and giving them a helping hand there. But I think it blocked, like, if you're in the car park waiting, it just blocked that potential for them to get out of the car, kind of come up. I've seen it in a few clubs where they're still allowing the people to do it kind of manually through paper, which is, technically it's okay, but it can be the last resort in relation to the health check. But it just means then that it does have the habit of having a congregation of people built up, and then just natural instinct with people is to stand and have a chat and stuff like that. So even if that's outside the club gates, I suppose you just want to try and get away from that. Even if it's in the car park, it's not necessarily right on the edge of the pitch, but I suppose you just want to try and get away from that. But I felt by just having that simple system in place, again, it boils down to your volunteer power on the mornings, and have we the 2 or 3 extras? Is there a mum or dad that would be comfortable, as long as you outline that that's the role maybe that they take up on the morning, that it's just checking the kids in and out of the car. We're not expecting you to do any coaching, but that's all we want you for. If it's a simple ask like that and someone feels comfortable to do that, I think it saves so much potential, that kind of congregating of people that's unnecessary, really, particularly in the times that we're in.
Just one question there coming in. A few of the people challenging my skills. If a chat room and a webinar isn't enough, they're texting me questions as well. So just obviously in mini rugby, we see kids with their gum shields quite a bit, and sometimes even when they're training fully, the gum shield is half in, half out of their mouth, and they're taking it out and dropping it on the ground. Where this is a risk of other kids picking it up and handing it back to somebody and things like that, or a coach picking it up, and we're in non-contact, could they train without gum shields at the moment?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I think with what, as you said, gum shields falling out half in, putting them out, tucked into a sock or whatever it is, and then falling out. From my point of view, I think, again, that's a common sense one for me, that we're not doing contacted training. It's pass catch, decision making, evasion, fun games. So for me, as a common sense thing, I would be saying, yeah, let's just leave them in the car for the minute, leave them in their gum shield case for the minute until we get to a place where we can get back to contact.
Yeah, that'd be my take as well. So even if in normal training and in camps where kids arrive up, we generally allow them to train, but not allow them to tackle without a gum shield. So we insist that they have a gum shield for tackling, but they can take part in other aspects of the training. So the phase we're in now, where that's non-contact, that should be, they could train without the gum shield in that sense. Some ideas there just coming through the chat room just on COVID apps. So I know one of the ones there is Club Force has mentioned. I believe Rugby Connect, the IRFU model as well, has an app. and many have probably come through the GA one as well, where it's a health check and reaffirming the health of the kids, where the parents must confirm the health of the kids each morning. And again, it just reinforces, puts that back in the forefront of people's minds before they send the children training as well.
Yeah, just I suppose the last few bits there, like as you can see on that sort of second slide, for me it is quite straightforward. I know the hardest thing for me was the amount of phone calls, the amount of video calls we done from May up to finally getting up and running in August. And I'm sure it was quite similar for yourselves in terms of the challenges that the COVID has brought, that the COVID compliancy for clubs has brought. But you know, we all got through that. We got to a place where we were able to open up rugby again. You know, and we gave that outlet, and it has been fantastic. Like, and the numbers have been great. And I know in some clubs, you know, kids, the numbers are up, and kids wise, the numbers are up even volunteer wise, because people are getting involved. And I think again, for volunteers on that side of it, again, I think it is reiterating that this is your role. So giving a definite answer on the role. It's not, oh, can you come out and give a hand, and they're left doing multiple things. I think if we define the role for the person, you know, you might get that person that will help you in the car park and do the simple check-in and stuff like that, and it will make your life a lot easier. Again, as I was saying there, in a nutshell, like it's follow the current IRFU guidelines that are there. So with the restrictions, obviously, still as it stands, we're able to work away with a pot of 15. I think it's focus on what we can do. Last few weeks, it's a lot of what I've been getting is, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. I think in general, we're all finding it hard to rise above it at this point. Be it on our work life or professional life, or personal life, it's challenging and difficult. I'm sure we're all in positions where we have kids at various levels of their lives as well. It's challenging on that, but I think we have to focus on what we can do. So we can still at the minute get out there and deliver on Saturday morning, and we can still deliver a really good product that's fun, that the kids are learning different skills within rugby. But the main thing is that it's fun and it's an outlet for them and an outlet for us. You know, we need that as well. Like, you know, I know, as I said earlier, I've had great fun just getting back out. I was out today with a group of first years in a school. Yesterday I was out with a senior group. And you know, a lot of it was some of the stuff that Conor's going to go through with you now. Like, so there's a huge mountain of stuff that Conor and the lads in the coach development side of the house have put together, and that you can do without bringing the element of contact into it. You know, there's tons of stuff there that can make it a really, you know, fun and enjoyable experience for the kids still, you know. And again, the big one for me is using common sense, you know, which isn't so common. I was going to put in something there with something that Trump was saying lately, but it's definitely not common on his side. But yeah, just use your common sense. A lot of your mums and dads as well there, you know, so you're doing what's in the best interest of the kids as well as the club, and the sport in general. So look, for me, I think trying to stay positive and again, focus on what we can do. And there's loads of stuff there that's going to keep the session entertaining for you and for the kids. So again, if any of you do have any questions, feel free to put them in, or we can share my details. There's no problem giving me a shout at any point.
Guys, I just want to come back in there, and I've just checked out the guidelines further there, and actually, so it's 15 players, and you can have a coach and a COVID compliance officer additional to that 15 players. So sorry, I just wanted to clarify that. Just check the guidelines on that.
Ross, just another couple of questions there coming in. What would be your views on the use of tackle bags? And again, if you're using them, what procedures around them?
No, straight and simple. No. At the minute with no contact, it's no. It's another surface. So it's another surface that someone's going to. Even I know we use them in relays and little bits and pieces like that, but it's a no, because you're going to have to disinfect after every single contact. So it's a no in relation to tackle bags, hit shields. Yeah.
And just coming back to what would have been your guidelines for coaches over the summer as regards the distance they would keep from players, barring needing to attend to a player for an injury? What would a recommended coaching distance be?
Yeah, so you're trying to maintain. So really good point to bring up. So when you're in this session and when the kids are playing, they're playing the game. So it's inevitable they're going to be closer than 2 meters apart. When you want to talk to the kids, so if you're coming in, you're doing a roll call. If you're bringing them in just to talk through a point on a specific skill you're delivering, you try and maintain the 2 meter distance. So they come in, but they space it out. So like little things we done in relation to that was when the kids arrived in the morning, we'd set up their little, let's say what you want to call a rest area. So we just coned it out again, and we left a cone for each kid. They came out and they put their bag or their water bottle on that space, and when we gave them a break, they went over and they stayed on that space. So I know it's a little bit restrictive, but it might only be a 5-minute break and they're back into their game. But again, that alleviated any kind of mess. And obviously you're dealing with 6-year-olds in some cases, and it's like herding cats on a Saturday morning, like, and trying to tell them to stay apart or stop from jumping all over each other. So again, I think if you can give them that little space that's theirs, and they identify that as theirs. One or two just other little things that came in there as well. In relation to if you, so within your pod, and just going back to if there was a sick child and attending then as a physio, let's say, or coming in to help a kid that's been injured, obviously you glove up. So the person that's appointed to do that is they glove up, put a mask on. Put a mask on the child if possible, and even if you want to try and put gloves on the child and try and tend to them. In relation to a COVID area within the clubhouse, again, it's probably quite a straightforward point, but it was just brought to my attention through someone, again, that was their child was in that group and they worked for the HSA. But if you have a child who has a sign or a symptom or has vomited, and you have to close that pod, so you obviously get the kids to space out again, maintain social distance outside. You're contacting them, their parents, and then they move from the pitch to the car. The child, I suppose, the suggestion within a lot of our guidelines around the COVID compliance is that the child who is feeling unwell or showing a sign or symptom is brought to a COVID area within the clubhouse, which is obviously generally a changing room or a specific area outlined by the COVID officer of the club. They if you can maintain the child outside, and it's obviously dry, the temperature is okay outside. If there's a stand, for instance, that they can sit in, possibly, why are we bringing them inside to potentially contaminate an inside space that you have to do a deep clean on? So it was just something that was, I suppose, staring in front of me, but I didn't see until that lady had pointed it out. So obviously, we're going to get into a period now where our Saturday mornings could be freezing cold, raining. Okay, we have to bring the child and keep them comfortable inside. But I suppose it's just a point that if it is a lovely Saturday morning, temperature's okay, we can keep the child comfortable outside, then they're not kind of potentially going in contaminating an area that we have to do a deep clean on, because obviously the rate drops when we are outside in terms of if someone did have it and been in close contact with them. So it was just another little point.
Okay, I'd like to thank Ross for that. Very interesting. A lot of procedures there. I know if you're a hands-on coach on the ground, there might be a lot of information there, but your compliance officer within the club would have gone through a lot of these procedures already, so they'd have a lot of this in place. While you as a coach on the ground, or particularly if you've only begun this year, you might not be aware of a lot of what is.
The rate drops when we are outside in terms of if someone did have it and been in close contact with them. So it was just another little point.
Okay, I'd like to thank Ross for that. Very interesting. A lot of procedures there. I know if you're a hands-on coach on the ground, there might be a lot of information there, but your compliance officer within the club would have gone through a lot of these procedures already, so they'd have a lot of this in place. While you as a coach on the ground, or particularly if you've only begun this year, you might not be aware of a lot of what is in place there within your own club. So it's probably making yourselves aware of that. So again, I'd like to thank Ross for your time on that. As I said, we're not strangers, so if there's any questions, feel free to throw the questions at me, and I'll share the emails of the presenters as well later on this evening after the webinar if there's any further questions coming in. So thanks again, Ross. I appreciate that.
No worries, guys. Thanks for your time.
Just one, so what a question that came in there, just as regards coaches wearing masks. So from my own knowledge of coaches, it really comes down to an individual thing. There isn't a requirement to wear masks outdoors where you're maintaining distances. Having said that, within Connacht Rugby, we'd have some coaches who wear masks, some coaches who don't. So it really is an individual thing. I would, I suppose, exercise discretion if you're a coach, who shouts a lot. While I wouldn't profess it, again, that probably increases the risk of droplets moving further and things like that. So just be aware of those aspects. But again, it's a purely individual aspect. Again, I know a lot of what Ross was saying there was kind of putting the procedures in place, and a lot of things probably that we need to do, to ensure we can play. And now we're going to move on to Conor's presentation about the models of how we can coach. And this is really the fun part and the enjoyment part. And again, back at the start, some of Ross's stuff has to happen so we can get to this fun part. But to come back to it, there's probably bits that we all have things in our life that make this period a little bit more bearable, and that might be sport on TV, or it might be golf, or it might be something else. And to bear in mind that those kids we have on a Saturday morning or an evening during the week, that rugby could be the hour in the week that makes getting through this that bit more bearable. So if to go to a little bit of the hardship of the procedures, but we're going to show you now some of the games, activities that we can do once we're in that. And we are kind of fortunate in rugby that we've elements of tag and touch and different variances that we can play. And I know firsthand, I've seen kids walking out of soccer where they can't play games now at all because the tackle of one-on-one in soccer is considered gone, and that's considered contact. And they're really missing that. And in a way, we have an advantage over other sports in that we can keep those elements going. So as I said at the start, Conor is the lead in our Rugby for Children program, which was devised without a pandemic at all in mind, and has a lot of attributes aside from the pods, or aside from the virus aspect of the pods. It's more about creating more enjoyable experience for children, getting them more games, more fun activities, developing the skills, and conditioning games, and looking at different ways of doing things to create that enjoyment. So I'll hand over to Conor to take this. I'm conscious that our time has pushed on, but I think with the amount of questions, I'm happy for it to continue flowing as it is. Okay.
Cheers, Molly. Guys, I'm gonna go kind of a machine gun fire at this. I'll be hitting you with a lot of stuff. And look, I suppose firstly, thanks for logging on. Thanks for what you're doing. Look, we're all very conscious all the time. We're lucky we get to work in rugby, but I suppose if you guys weren't doing what you're doing on the ground, we'd have nothing to do. We'd all be at home every day, and there'd be no rugby for us, So, like, sometimes we forget to say it, but we really appreciate what you're doing, and the fact that you're all logging on tonight, trying to just, maybe try and get some answers to stuff is great to see. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Rugby for Children, and hopefully, if this works, I'm not the most technically minded guys, but Molly, can you see that okay? Mal, yeah, no,
yeah, I got that.
Yeah, cool, lads. Okay, so lads, yeah, and guys, so basically, what we're going to talk about tonight is the kind of using Rugby for Children as an approach to coaching in COVID. So the things that are fired at us at the minute is we're working in groups of 15 players or less. So we're working in our pods. So typically, a lot of mini sections I would see might have somewhere around 20. They might have 24, depending on, they might have up to 30. They might have anywhere down to 12. If you've only got 12 or 14, that's your pod, and you're pretty well set. If you've got 24, you've probably got to get into your 2 pods and think about it that way. And can we work in groups of 8, 10, 12, and have 2 separate groups on the go? And that's kind of where this came from. originally the idea was around Rugby for Children was to get kids getting as many touches of the ball and as many involvements as they could, rather than maybe sometimes getting lost in bigger groups of 30. Kind of almost by accident, this thing is going to act as a little bit of a tool that we can use to get us through. So the lads touched on some of the restrictions there. So obviously work in smaller groups, the contact nature of rugby is gone at the moment. So we're into kind of touch and tag and then handling and then little fun games. We have a resource on the website that's kind of shared out, hopefully out through your coach coordinators, and hopefully that stuff will go out to you. If it doesn't come to you from your coordinators, you can go direct to the website. It's connachtrugby.ie, and it's the club and community aspect of it under coaching. And look, we have your contacts here tonight, so we'll send on the links to you as well. So basically, guys, the aim with Rugby for Children, as you see it there, it's kind of trying to cover three things really. So number one, really important, we're trying to support the clubs and the coaches. Number two, we're trying to create a fun and learning environment for the players. And then I suppose number three, we're trying to keep players engaged in the game. Like these young players that we have now, they're going to be the coaches and the mentors of tomorrow, you know, and they're going to be the players. And our job is to try and keep them in the game as long as they can. And I suppose our second job is to try and support you guys that are doing the work on the ground. We feel that there's so much really, really good stuff going on the ground, and we've tried to try and put a support structure there for coaches that are looking to try and find, because we find that when we do a lot of coaching courses or a lot of workshops, coaches come to say, look, that was great, but where's the games, or have you listed them games, or have you listed those drills? And we probably didn't really have them. So what we've tried to do is we try to put them together, that they're all in one place, and we try to put an approach around it that basically coaches can kind of have a little model that if they're coaching with another coach or another couple of coaches, they have something that they can kind of rely on, basically having a session plan or a coaching plan. So if you like getting your ego stroked, guys, you're in the right place, because I'm going to tell you how amazing you are for another couple of seconds. But look, I suppose the mini rugby building blocks at the minute, I suppose we see mini rugby as probably putting that first layer of bricks in the wall of rugby, and how key it is. You know, coaches, you guys are there probably doing a lot of things that will probably stay with these players for the longest time. So directly as coaches, you can create enjoyable sessions by being planning and organised. You can have, I suppose, a massive effect on nurturing a love for the game for the players. We find that if the players don't love the game, they're not going to stay. And really, I think if we all look back on different sports we played, we can probably put our finger on a coach that had a big effect on us, that made us love the game, whatever it might be, whether it's 3A or rugby or soccer or whatever it might be. Also, as coaches, you have a huge effect on how these players can improve. Now, I'm not saying necessarily they're all going to play for Ireland or play for Connacht or go on to play for Craigs or Ballinasloe or Sligo or whatever into senior rugby, but you can help them achieve to the best of their abilities, and whatever that might be. And that's the skills that you'll give them at minis, they'll carry through with them for life in rugby, which is massive. And then obviously, as we said there, as coaches, you can have a massive effect on the players that stay in the game. We see in sport at the moment, there's a huge entry point of kids coming into sport, and there's obviously a huge exit point as well. A lot of kids have a lot of different choices at the moment, and you know, we find that actually, to be fair, at minis, it's really, really good, because overall across the province, we see that the kids really enjoy it, they really love it, and you know, it's up to us to try, if we can, even to find even more wins and make it even better if that's possible. So you guys and the effect you have on these kids, and maybe it's the biggest highlight in the week, especially with what we're living in at the moment, you have a massive effect on players staying in the game. And obviously, the more players we have in the game at mini, it makes our game stronger in Connacht, and that's all what we're all working towards. So Rugby for Children is kind of based around three things. It's a game-based approach, and we see game zone in the middle. So game-based approach basically means we're always constantly either looking to play a game, or we're leaving a game to practice a skill, or we're trying to get back to a game. And within that, then we have other two little areas. We have skill zones and play zones. And basically, they're just three, I suppose, titles for what we've always been doing when we're coaching mini. So when we're coaching something, it's always going to fall into one of those three things. We're either doing a skill zone, which I suppose we might call a drill or a reduced activity, a play zone, which is a bit of fun, a bit of crack, a bit of movement, a bit of chase. I call them kind of chasing games that you might play out in the yard, little P games that we all played probably growing up, and also the kids are still playing now. And then game zone is obviously the meat of your session, and that's your rugby, that's your game. And that can be anywhere from contact rugby right the way down to touch and tag, which what we'll be playing at the moment. So realistically, all the time, every little aspect of what you do will be one of those three things. And that's reflected in the resource on the website. You're going to have an access to skill zone games, game zone games and play zone games. And obviously we'll try and add to that. And that's also kind of the spine that goes through our sessions. So when we go to a session, what we're trying to have, I suppose, a setup where the coaches are going to be a little bit more organized. And the thinking behind it is that everyone is going to do this differently. Some people do it by WhatsApp, some people do it by a phone call, some people do it by email. And look, there is no right way to do it. This resource is here in your back pocket for you to use, and how you and your coaches decide to use it is up to you. But what we're hoping, both during COVID and then when we get out of it and when we go back to rugby as we knew it, we're hoping maybe that coaches can kind of adopt this approach. So my next session is something where this is 3 or 4 things that we would like you to do moving forward as a coach to, number one, obviously help the kids, but not more importantly, but also importantly to help yourselves and to make the sessions really, really enjoyable. So the first thing we'd love you to do is to have a plan. We have some plans on the website, and there's going to be more and more added that we'll send out to you. That's just a suggestion. Again, you can copy that word for word, or you can look at it and tweak it and change it or add things in or use a blank template, whatever you like. But the reason behind it, guys, is if we have a session plan, it number one means we're a little bit more organized. We know what we're doing. And it just means that we can have a little bit of a flow of a session. It also means that if I'm coaching with a couple of people, if I have a couple of mums and dads that are helpers, it gives me the ability to give them specific jobs, keep them included, spread the load of the session, and overall we become more involved in the session, and more people feel that they're part of it. Obviously, at the moment, we're trying to build our base of volunteers, and we found a whole new base of people having to find all these compliance officers and COVID officers. So that's the first thing we're hoping to do, is to have a session plan every time we go in. The second thing we want to do, and Ross touched on it earlier on, when we arrive to a session, now this is totally up to you. For me, if I was doing a mini session in the morning, I definitely try and be out on the pitch 20 minutes before and have everything lined out the way I want it before it starts. No more than putting down a session plan, no more than putting down a lesson plan as a teacher. I know as a coach, I know where I'm going to start when the kids arrive, and I know where I want to get to, finishing with a game where the kids are having loads of crack. What we want is, it's that roadmap in the middle. And if I can be there and have my session laid out, that's going to give me a really good chance to run the session. It also, like I said, it means that all coaches buy in, because everyone knows they have their job. And even if it's a mum or a dad that doesn't maybe have much experience or very, very new to it, if I can give them a really specific job, look, all I want you to do today is run this little game. You can send them a little video of the game. And now they know, now they have a context of what they're trying to do. It takes a little bit of pressure off you as a coach. It allows you to work to your group of 15. And it's just a little bit simpler. So having that little session plan laid out and have an idea of, we're going to start at point A, we're going to go B, C, D, and we're going to rotate around in our little flow. I think as a coach, I think we'll set ourselves a little target every day. So today our aim is, I do this myself, or I try to. So today our aim might be today my aim is, I'm going to try and talk to every player there. I'm going to ask every player how they are. Did they have a good week? That might be my thing. Today my aim is, I'm going to ask the players more questions instead of me telling them stuff. I'm going to try and ask them more. Today my aim is, I'm going to try and play games for a little bit longer and play the drills a little bit shorter. But whatever that might be, and then at the very end, you can say, okay, how close to par was I? Or did I go over par or under par? And you give yourself a little target of, I think if I go under par, it means that it's going to be a better session for me and the kids. And then finally, at the end of the session, a quick debrief with me and my little team of coaches. So maybe my couple of coaches and my compliance officer or my COVID officer, what went well today? How did check-in go? This didn't work. We need to change this for next week. That game went really well. That match went really well. Geez, that drill was great. The other one didn't work at all. I'm not going to do that one anymore. How did you find it? These little things, you know. How did Johnny get on? Did he bring a friend with him? All these kind of things. A little 5-minute debrief, and it gives you a great little bit of context the next time you go to your next session. Okay. So these are just things in terms of the restrictions that we're working on at the moment. I suppose firstly with rugby for children, but also in general with the level 3 that we're working in at the moment. So these are the things that I know that we're all doing these things here on the left at the moment. Okay, and I know there might be a little bit of things on the right, and I'm not saying we're going to do these exclusively, and I'm not saying we're going to get rid of other stuff, but we're going to try, if we can, to do a little bit more of the things on the left, and we're going to do a little bit less on the things on the right. So if we talk about planning our session, there's always times when life gets in the way, and I understand that. And sometimes you rock up and you say, oh, what will we do? You know, should we just do what we did last week? And look, that's okay. But if we can make an effort to have a little situation where on a Friday night, we send a text, who's doing the session plan for tomorrow? It doesn't have to be an hour-long thing. It can be a 10-minute thing where you just have a quick chat. You might decide you get there at 10:15. If the session is starting at 10:45, have a 10-minute planning session, write a few things down, have a little bit of paper in your pocket. Whatever way works for you guys. But whatever can be done to be a little bit more organized. The small set of games, obviously, I'm a big fan of, and working in our groups of maybe 14 or 15. For me, if you can play loads of 6-a-side games, 5-a-side games, 7-a-side games, to me, the benefits are pretty obvious, but it's more touches, more involvement, more ability for the quieter players and the newer players to get into the game. 15-a-side, 14-a-side, 12-a-side, it's very easy for kids to get lost. So, you know, there's a reason that these soccer academies and all these kind of things play 4-a-side and 5-a-side. So more involvement with the small set of games. You know, kid gets into the car after, how'd you get on? I scored 5 tries. Brilliant. I really loved it. Versus, how'd you get on today? Oh, I never got the ball in the game. You know, so it allows you as a coach to kind of tweak. You can make sure that some of those newer players get more of the ball. You know, you're in control and those kind of things. And, you know, I'd be a big fan of the small set of games as a way to involve players. Obviously, they're going to be busier. They're going to be, you know, running that little bit further and faster and harder. And they're going to feel that they've had a really good training session. The rotation between activities. So you'll see in the session plans that are sent out, we're kind of saying that any activity you do, you can do it anywhere to 10 to 12 minutes. And you always have that little thing in your head that we've done this for 10 minutes. And I know in 2 minutes, I'm moving on to the next thing. You know, so I might, for example, have my assistant coach with me or my fellow coach with me. And I'm giving him the little signal to say, okay, in 2 minutes, they're going to be over to you for that little relay race. I know I can take a little step back then, and then they're back to me. Now, I also know that's not always the case. Sometimes we don't have that much help. But I think for the kids, what it does is by constantly rotating from game to activity to game to activity, it keeps them on their toes, it keeps them guessing, it kind of goes, what's happening next, you know, rather than them getting into a kind of a rush, they're always wondering what's happening next. Player movement is pretty self-explanatory. We're constantly looking to, you know, keep the kids moving, keep them active, and make them feel like they've had a really good run around, especially now with probably kids not getting much activity and much exercise at the moment in school possibly. And then finally, playing time. Again, going back to those games, can we get them playing as much as possible? Can we, as much as possible, being organized? Can we stop those standing times? Can we stop those stopping times, those setup times where we lose a minute or two when we lose the kids' attention? Can we keep one step ahead? Like the teacher 5 pages ahead in the book, can we be a little bit ahead of them so they're constantly going from the next thing to the next thing? You know, if the session is an hour, could we keep them active for 50 minutes of that hour? And then the other thing in between is little drinks of water and stuff like that. Obviously, with the less guys, it's the cues, it's the stop-start nature, and it's the static players. Can we be organized and to stop where we have players standing around, getting cold, slowing down, congregating in little groups of 3 and 4? Can we, in our setup, can we say, can we eliminate those things, and can we have best practice? And then finally, with level 3, we see the things that have got to go for now. So tackle and rucking bags, I say leave them in the shed, guys. We can't do any tackling or rucking right now. We can't do any scrums, and staying away from those huddles. I know the kids love it. And look, I love myself when I was playing or when I was coaching, bringing in kids, bringing in young fellas, bring them into a big huddle. It's a great way to build that bit of camaraderie. But if you've spent the whole session keeping your distance and playing tag and playing touch, and then we do a huddle at the end, it's probably a little bit counterproductive. So it's not gone forever, but it's just gone for now, so we can keep playing rugby a little bit longer. Okay. So from talking to a lot of coaches, and you see tonight the numbers that are on here, there's brilliant work going on. Lately I've seen the minis in Loughrea and Monavea, which are down in my area, and Buccaneers, and I hope to get around to a lot more mini sections. And just the work that's going on is awesome. It really, really is, and it's great to see it. And the biggest thing I see sometimes is I see coaches beating themselves up a little bit. You know, am I doing the right thing? Geez, Conor, what do you think? Geez, that wasn't a great session, you know, and they're kind of almost being too hard on themselves. So I'd answer the same thing all the time. So if you're asking yourself, am I doing the right thing? So number one, you're on a course or you're on a little refresher tonight, trying to make yourself a better coach. I think you're in a really good place already. Okay, but these are the things that I would ask myself. And if I'm ticking yes to the majority of these, I'm doing the right thing. Are the players smiling during the session? Are they having a good time? Are they playing games versus standing around? Are they always on the move? Are they busy? Are they active and engaged? Are the players looking forward to the next thing? What are we doing next? Versus are they looking off into the air? Are they a little bit bored? Are they improving? And that can be a hard thing to see. They're not going to turn into Johnny Sexton overnight, but are they getting a little bit better? You know, and I see the pride the coaches talk to you. Oh, our lads have got so good at their tackling. Our lads passing has really come on. You want to see them in the blitz the last day. And you can actually see the pride bursting out through coaches. And that's brilliant to see. Big one. Are they coming back each week? They have more now. When I was a kid, we didn't have as much to choose from, you know, but there's so much more. There's so many reasons for kids to stay at home. If they're coming back each week, that to me tells me they're enjoying it. Are they bringing a friend? So not only are they enjoying it, but they're telling their friends that they want their friends to come. And then ultimately, guys, and an important one to remember, as a coach, are you enjoying it? Are you coming out to a session a little bit disorganized, a little bit stressed, and the kids are maybe, you know, you're trying to keep them entertained, but because you're having to go and set stuff up on the fly that you're losing them a bit and then you're getting a bit stressed out? Or have you your session organized? Are you relying on your fellow coaches? Are you taking little breaks in between where they take the lead and you step back and vice versa? And I promise you, if you do that and you're well organized and you're doing little games that they enjoy and you enjoy, you'll enjoy it more. And the kids will feed off that. The kids want to see you enjoying it. And if they see that you're happy and enjoying it, they'll enjoy it more. Okay, so they're the kind of things that I would say, are important. And again, not to beat yourself up. I know it's hard in the COVID world at the moment. We're all questioning ourselves and what we're doing. But to me, if you're organized, if you're running sessions that are active and busy, if you're staying within the guidelines, you're doing the right stuff. And just to keep remembering that you're providing a really good facility for the kids to enjoy themselves. And if they're coming back each week and they're coming back eager and busy, they're really good. They're really good warning, flashing signs for me that things are good. The last thing for me, guys, in terms of the rugby for children stuff, like I said, the session plans are there on the website. The little individual games are there on the website. You as a coach can go in and you can either take the set menu and you can pick it word for word, and there'll be 3 or 4 more going up for the weekend, hopefully, or you can go a la carte. You can go in with your blank piece of paper and you can copy out little bits you like, leave out bits you don't like, say, no, I'd never do that. My lads would hate that, or my girls would hate that. Pick the bits you like. Have a little focus for sharing. So whether it's WhatsApp, like I said, or whatever, share with the other coaches. Have the ability to kind of try stuff out. And like I said, if it works, brilliant, keep going with it. If not so much, park it there. And with this rugby for children thing, guys, what you'll find is you'll be rotating, like I said, from fun games to skills or activities back into rugby matches, and you'll just be rotating around. It might be a 10-minute block, 10-minute block, 10-minute block, 10, 10, 10, and that's your 60 minutes. And at the moment, we're doing 60-minute sessions, and you'll be out of there. Okay, so I know that was pretty fast. I'm conscious that I'm talking to myself here a little bit as well because you're all muted. But look, like I said, keep the good work going. I know it can be difficult with all the stuff, but when you're out on the pitch, I promise you, being more organised will make you enjoy the session. If you enjoy it, the kids will enjoy it, and ultimately, that's what we're all here to do. Okay.
Conor, a couple of questions have come in there. I'll take the first one there. Paul was just asking, can Pod 1 play against Pod 2? And he gives an example of 9 players in each. So if there's 9 players in each, no, the pods can't play each other. Effectively, I suppose a pod could be considered as a group of 15 players.
Yeah.
So within that group of 15 should remain the same until the current guideline on November the 10th. So they can play each other within that pod, but they should not be interacting with other pods.
I think that the thing with it, Molly, is just to keep going back to the pod thing. The pod is there to protect yourselves and to protect the kids. So if you do get a case in one of your pods, it means you as a coach or your compliance officer can say with a lot of confidence to the group that are in the same age group but not in the same pod, your kid was training in such and such a group, but he was never mixing with that other group. So instead of having to make 18 phone calls, you only have to make 9 phone calls. And we hope, obviously, you don't have to do it. And please God, everyone here never has to do it. But the whole reason behind it is if they play a match, if they interact when they go for their drink, if they interact for one drill, really, there's no point splitting it all. And what it does is it doubles up the emphasis on you then to have to contact all the kids. You'll have twice as many kids then that in theory could be close contacts, because it's impossible once they go into drills or games, it's impossible to say who was or wasn't a close contact. So that will be, it's really just there to kind of as a backup for you as a coach and for the players.
I suppose we've seen that we've seen good and bad examples. So at times we've seen where a case occurred and an entire club has to shut down, where the tracing might be quite difficult. But we've also seen the really good examples with schools back at the moment, where only one class has to go out because they've managed their grouping so well. A similar question there from Kevin, just on if you have 16 players, would you split them into 2/8? So unfortunately you have to, Kevin, I'm afraid. But I'll let Conor stress, like, using the Rugby for Children model, it almost looks like those 8 players are training together if they're moving around in those pods of 8. So I'll let Conor explain that a bit better if you wish.
Yeah, so I suppose if you have your 8, and so if you have 16 this week and you're trying to establish, if you haven't been doing it up to now, and if you're trying to establish your working pods that are going to stay together, if you have 16 that arrive this week, they're your 8 and your 8. If those 16 come back next week with 3 more, you basically just divide them as they come and add them to those pods and keep them in their pods. Look, I suppose as much as you can, you know your kids better than anyone. You're going to know the kids who are going to turn up. The nightmare situation, I guess, is, and I've had it myself, where you have one pod of 10 or 12 and then maybe 3 or 4 turn up in the other pod. And I understand that's very difficult, and what you think to yourself is you're going to cross over. But what I would say is, with any queries like that, when any kind of little curveballs are thrown to you, your compliance officers have had the training and they have the information. But as much as you can, I think try and establish pods that where you believe your regular trainers are, and try and split them, that that you're going to have, those 8 or 10 kids in each group each week, if at all possible. And I understand it's difficult, but that's kind of with any rules and regulations, people probably look at how can I get around it. But with things like this, the advice would be just to go and say, look, if we have to try and manage to train 6 guys someday, then that's what we've got to do.
Thanks, Conor. I appreciate that. I'm conscious we're gone on time. If there's further questions, folks, again, as I said, what I'll do is circulate an email again to share some of the ideas and share the guys' contact details. The Rugby for Children model, again, is there to simplify those groupings and make it fairly seamless. And I know Conor conducts webinars with clubs and clusters of clubs as well, and we're doing our best to get on the ground as much as we can under county restrictions at the moment. But again, we're hoping to expand that as well. So, Conor, I'd like to thank you again for your presentation this evening. Just before we close off, I have Lyndon Jones here as well, who's the head of participation rugby, and is I would lean on as regards the guidelines and things like that quite a bit. So I just want to check in, Lyndon, and see, is there anything you would like to add to what's been said already?
Hey, how are you? Yeah, I suppose, guys, on the pods of 15, I'm involved coaching in a club myself with an adult team, and it's tough going. There's no denying it, but the benefits are massive. We experienced it over the summer with our skill zones, where we had 48 kids at a particular camp, and one of our pods, Ross alluded to, a child got sick, so we had to shut down that pod and contact those parents. But the rest of the camp could keep going. None of the other pods were affected because there was no mixing of those pods at all. And it's huge peace of mind that you're minimizing whatever risk is potentially there, and the other pods are not affected at all. So it is tough. Totally get that. My bit of advice would be, as Conor said, try and get try and put pods of good trainers together. So if you've got 20 kids, and you've got 10 kids that are really good trainers and they're always training, try and split those 5 and 5, so that you're guaranteed that you'll have a quorum on a weekly basis. The mistake I made when I was splitting my pods, first of all, I split an equal number of backs and forwards, but one pod were way better trainers than the other pod. So some nights I had 5 and 6 in one pod, and I had 13 and 14 in another pod. So it would have been much better to pick on who's a regular trainer. So that'll be my one tip in terms of the pods. But look, they're well worthwhile sticking with. So again, just to echo what everybody else said, thanks very much for all the work you're doing and for attending tonight. And I see Kevin, you're coming in with a question there, just on the pods. Yeah, they should be the same players week in, week out. Yeah. So if you have, as Conor said, if you've got 16 players, they should be 2 pods of 8. There should be the exact same eight players each week.
So thanks, Lyndon. I appreciate that. And thanks all of you for attending. I hope it's been a very informative evening. As I said, we're not strangers, so if there's any queries at all, we're here to make your jobs a bit easier on the pitch. And I was just doing a swift calculation there myself. I think we had 65 on the webinar, and I realized that's only a snapshot of the number of people coaching in the province. But if I took a conservative estimate of, those 65 having 25 players each, that's 1,625 young people who are enjoying rugby on a Saturday morning or at some other time. And as Conor said, if we're hitting that objective of putting smiles on faces, we live in a world now where we're probably seeing numbers every day for the wrong reasons. If we could publicize numbers every Saturday morning of the number of kids that had smiles on faces because of what you guys are doing in rugby, that'd be phenomenal. And I think in the long term of this thing and looking back on it, the role sport and rugby plays in it is going to be massive. So again, thanks for your time this evening, but more importantly, thanks for all the time and the joy you bring to the kids week in.